What to do and what not to do when installing Classic Mini radius arm grease tubes. A wonderfully simple task of the radius arms is installing the grease tubes. However, you still must use some TLC in doing so. Now, if you've watched my previous video on plastic versus metal tubes, you will understand why I have chosen to go solely metal sleeves in all of my radius arms. Now, if you install the metal sleeves correctly without damage, basically you can help ensure that your bearings are going to receive the proper amount of grease. While it's an easy job, plastic or metal can be damaged without you even being aware of. And I will show you how and why. Now, depending on which reamer you have or which reamer you plan to use, that may depend on the sequencing of the whole operation. Go watch my previous reamer video, which demonstrates one particular reamer, what I consider to be the best reamer on the market. And because right now I've already done the reaming, now I've got a beautifully clean radius arm, and I'm installing the grease tube, and then I will install the bearing. All right, I have recently installed a brand new bushing. I've reamed it. I've cleaned out the inside of the radius arm. I have located it back in the vise with the bearing side up. Whether you decide to install plastic or metal tubes, the end with the smaller diameter goes in first, and it will mate up flush with the bushing down on the bottom, while the end with the larger diameter will flush up with the bearing on the top side. Placing the tube in, it will only go so far before a little bit of force is required to assist. It kind of stops right there. I found an 18 millimeter socket that is pretty good wall thickness. At least it hits on the inside of the radius or the grease tube. And this is going to help me to knock it down in small amounts. Now here's what you want to watch out for. Do not merely knock this guy in thinking it will bottom out with the bushing. This could cause unseen damage. As you're knocking the tube in, of course up here on the bearing side, I'm just doing light taps, and it's already going in, I can tell. Okay, periodically as I'm knocking this guy in from the bearing side, I reach down in the bottom, I reach down through the bushing, and I'm feeling for the edge of the tube, and yeah, I can feel it. You can feel when you reach in through the bushing, you can feel the inside edge of the bushing, and you can feel the casting step of the radius arm. So as you knock the tube closer to the casting, stop and feel around the perimeter's edge of the tube, just to make sure that it remains concentric. Concentric with the casting step, that is. It's easier to determine as the tube gets a little bit closer. All right, I want to point out the edge of my tube is pretty close to the step in the casting, and if you watch the socket, you can see it moving around. I can move it because the grease tube goes in easily at a skewed angle, and so I can, depending on the direction that I force the tube, I can move it around. There are two ways to help determine if the tube is concentric inside the radius arm. Number one, as you're knocking the tube in lightly, you may feel it bottom out when it hits either the casting step or the bushing. Feel inside to see if the tube is flush with the top of the bushing. If the tube still has a ways to go before it's flush with the bushing, then odds are it's stuck or bottomed out on the casting step if you felt it bottom out. Therefore, and like my scenario, number two, reach in and feel the edge of the tube. As you go around the perimeter, you may feel the edge of the one side, but not the other. This will clue you in that the tube was going in at a skewed angle and resting on the casting step. If this happens for you, apply pressure on the sidewall of the tube in the direction that will pull it away from the casting shelf, making it more concentric, and lightly tap at the same time to get it past the casting step and down flush to the bushing where you feel it bottom out. Warning, let's back up a step. If you feel it bottom out, but it's not pushed down far enough to clear the bearing being installed, you may be inclined to give it another hard whack, believing that it's stuck. This is where unseen damage happens. If you do not ensure the tube is concentric, the next whack can either crack a plastic tube or bend a metal tube, which is what you do not want, especially because you can't see the damage. And so right now I'm aligning it with the step in the casting to make sure that it remains concentric. Okay, it is now bottomed out. I did feel it bottom out on the step, but it has now bottomed out with the inside edge of the bushing. So I am good to go. All right, so with the job done correctly, and I know that it's down flush with the bushing, my next task is to install the bearing, and I may or may not show that on video. But once again, I thank you for watching Lone Star Mini. Bye just now.